submission. No one gets paid to do anything on the board or through the review process. We cooperate with a network of about 100 professors and doctors from around the world who help us with our review process. And we are indexed and have a DOI number. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. We publish in English, and we aim to publish 2 issues a year, usually containing around 12 papers. There is quite a rigorous peer review, and it is quite transparent because everything goes through the system, so we can't really even protect the authors from the truth, from what the reviewers say, because you see it instantly online. It comes to your email address. The submission process is all done online through the web portal. It's held by Poznań University. It's the best university in Poland, which has the best social science department and sociology department. A very long tradition as well. It's a 15th century university. Our university is involved from the sociology of education and social pedagogy side of things. We're co-editing with my colleague from Poznań, and I think that the idea is that Professor Monteiro and Professor Juszczak will be the guest editor for the special issue, which will contain most of the conference proceedings. And we really do hope that you will decide to submit your papers to our journal. What I can be sure of is that it will be timely reviewed and published early next year when you're ready, when you have all the papers you want. It's really quite flexible. But let's say we will aim at June. It should give us enough time for corrections and responding to reviewers' comments. But if it's ready earlier, then we can publish it earlier. There's quite a lot of flexibility in this. There are no fees, application for anyone involved, and it's all transparent and online. I will forward the exact instructions to Professor Monteiro on Monday so that he can distribute the referencing style. It's an American Sociological Association referencing style. I think it's ASA, we would say, yes, ASA. And normally the paper length is about 12 pages, but there's no limit. If you do 24 or more, that's fine. If you feel like you need to express yourself more in a long way. I don't know if you have any questions. I'll be here all day, so you can come and talk to me. And we would love to have this special issue from this conference, because we think that all these presentations are very informative, very interesting, and definitely worth sharing with our board and with our network of contacts. But this also will be very useful online and promoted through social media, not in the form of fake news, but just a sort of joyful collection of important works from New York University. So, thank you.
Any more questions, clarifications you would like to ask?
Wait, I have some questions.
Yeah.
There's a report from.
Yes.
The first question is the papers that we collect. Will we select like a theme for the journal, or just call it a special edition? Do we have to have a name theme that's based on the supposed title?
It's up to you. This is totally your choice.
Okay.
We will go with the flow, whatever you decide. And we can use it. If it's better for you to have a special edition, we can do like a special issue with guest editors. If you want to have a regular issue, because it will turn out that the mix is more diverse than you initially thought in terms of subjects, then you can run it as an ordinary issue, just as guest editors. Normal issue comes out every 6 months.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
So just a comment. I've had articles submitted through Society Register, and I will tell everyone who submits to us, the process is exactly what Dr. Anna Coates says it is. It's transparent. I've gotten good reviews and bad reviews. I've had things published. I've had things critiqued, and I've always been very, very, very impressed with the quality of feedback that I've gotten. And I'm a big believer, I only have one fault of what you're saying. As a graduate of the University of Warsaw in political sociology, I object to the Poznan standard. That's the only qualification.
Well, you can look at the new tables of, like ranking tables in
All the
Poznan
time.
Department of Social Sciences, best in Poland.
There is definitely an intercollegiate rivalry.
I see. Well, I have no interest in promoting that university.
I
As,
know.
Mine is quite small comparatively, but it is good. It is good.
But I've been very, very impressed with the process and the critiques I've found. And Anna is an incredibly supportive person.
What can I say? Thank you, Mark.
And
You're not fun. Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick question.
Okay.
Yes,
In
please.
terms of the editing process, say you've never submitted to an official newsletter before, or you have in terms of what we're doing here. My question is how, you said that the editing process is grueling. About what's the time period between when you first receive an article to when it's actually published?
Between 3 to 6 months. And if an unlikely case of rejection, you can resubmit after you've done all the things that you could do, consultations and so on. It doesn't cross you out completely. It means that you need to wait for the next issue and resubmit to the next issue.
Okay. We also have another opportunity for publication as an edited book. Our partner in this symposium, Catholic University of Sacred Heart, Sacro Cuore in Milan, they have their own in-house publishing takes place, and that is Vita e Pensione. And may I request Professor Ingrid to just talk?
I prefer to be absolutely about that.
I see. Okay, Professor Fausto Colombo. Yeah. I see. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, but there is an opportunity also to be published as an edited book of the proceedings. Thank you, Ed. Any comments about yesterday's discussions, ideas that may stand out to you, other than our wonderful experience at Symposium? Yes.
She needed another book.
I found it very interesting. And for me, it all boils down to reflective judgment and thinking. And I was thinking about Scandinavian schools that now introduce special classes in children, how to identify fake news and how to critically assess the content of media. And that's actually on the level of elementary school and even of preschool. So it becomes recognized even at educational facilities at a young age. Saying now that there's so much information and you need to choose and make your own mind. And another comment is for me the whole day is down to language and power. So basically the first law, how things are done. Recently I think it was interesting research by Celine Marie Pascal from the American University, who writes about vocalization of language and how it's used in propaganda terms by politicians and so on. And listening to the colleagues from India and Italy and other countries, I feel that this is just a global phenomenon that in each country the media are used in a way to steer the public opinion, and it's always the question who is behind it, right? Whether it's the corporations or the institutions. So language and power became kind of
It looks like yesterday evening when we were talking with our friend from France, Patrick Bissonneau, he brought up this issue of visual literacy. So now we also need different types of literacies. We also looks like need media literacy, not only reading literacy but also media literacy, visual literacy, which has to become part of our educational process from very beginning, from very early in our educational process. So yeah.
I honestly, like, I was so, the insight of that shift from critical text literacy being a predominant vehicle for a common core university to the need for a critical image literacy. I found it so compelling that I feel like one consequence of this conference is that we should advocate that to the university as either our common core or core connection or some type of adjustment to what the undergraduate support is. It is such a remarkably significant oversight in something that is so pervasive and so day to day and so underappreciated and significant. I really think, like, whether we end up as a university with a common core, professional core, the idea of introducing, advocating, and being known for this, I think, is a fantastic idea.
I think you're absolutely right. You're onto something that we could continue working on in a much more concrete way. We have at our university, we have for undergraduate students, and my colleague, my friend there, Professor Paul Gillenhammer, can add a little more. We require our students in undergraduate degree, regardless your specialization, your major, we call it here, they must take certain what we call core classes in humanities, such as philosophy. They have to take, at the moment, they have to take 3 classes in philosophy, whether they're studying pharmacy or biology, whatever. They have to study 3 classes or in 3 courses in theology, regardless of your religion, because we have all kinds of religions here. So if you are a student at St. John's University, this is the required courses you have to do. And also, I think this is now an opportunity for us also to start introducing visual literacy, media literacy as kind of the core part of the core components. We could have organize a conversation around it, and see at least we could find how within our own college.
I think it would also be an amazing, to put this in the crassest term possible,
Yeah.
it would be an amazing marketing opportunity to differentiate the power of our core versus that of others. Because this is something which, even to my knowledge, the best universities that have a core, University of Chicago, Columbia, Harvard, they have not considered the significance of image literacy as a separate part of the core. What they have done consistently is they've had art history in some form, and they've had critical reading of philosophical texts, but they haven't merged them. And that merger in praxis, I think, would be an amazing thing for us to offer to students, because it recognizes the significance of that type of media interaction that's happening day to day.
Anyone else would like to add? Yes, Piana.
So I completely agree with that. I think it would definitely benefit the student, just because media is such a dictator of our lives and we use it every day, even when we don't think that we're affected by media, it's surrounding us. Like the backdrop there is advertising in St. John's, and it's just us being in a room. So I think media literacy is extremely important to not only educate the student, but make them more aware in their everyday life that this is something, whether we want to believe it or not, whether our individual beliefs disagree with something, that we can always be influenced by what's around us.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else would like to add?
Well, I guess I would just like to plug some of my friends' research on this. There's a whole field in communication studies called visual rhetoric. And my friend Bob Harriman has several books, all published University of Chicago Press, on still images and literacy regarding them. One of the greatest of the books, I think, is called No Caption Required. or no caption needed. And it talks a lot about the politics and the literacies involved with visual text. And that might be a great starting place for a book that could be included in the core curriculum, or might lead you to a book that would be useful in that curriculum.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, this, like if I look at this in the historical context, the question I would ask is, well, why was the core started, when it was started, and what technology did it serve? So we look at the original core, like the original core for undergraduates at Harvard, at Chicago, at Stanford. What was it? It was Latin and Greek classics in text form. So you had both form and content. And the question is, why that form and why that content? And the reason to me was twofold. Number one, it was seen as the baseline for all discussions of contemporary Western institutions, and it was in text form. Number two, there was a very powerful technology, which was that knowledge of Latin and Greek furthered all future work in law and medicine, other areas. So it was really a syntax of this core vocabulary. And we're missing that at this moment because technology has outpaced the way that we construct what a core is. And I think this is really the discussion we're having now, which is, how has technology reshaped what the need for a core ought to be? If I'm glued to a screen 12 hours a day, and I have no idea I'm getting what I'm getting or what it means, right? That hurts me as a citizen. It hurts me as a consumer. It hurts me as a producer. And I will be as disenfranchised in a sense as I would be not knowing Latin or Greek. I think that we have to look at it in that historical spectrum and both critique it, but also say this is where it's going. I honestly, to me, it was a huge takeaway how important that one sentence happens to be. That we don't teach visual literacy at all. It's astounding we don't do it.
Thank you. Any other thoughts about yesterday's discussions? Comments? No. All right, so I think we could start. And our presenter from Israel, he just emailed me yesterday. He ran into dealing with some family emergency situations in Israel and could not be here. So we have enough time for our presentations. I'm going to invite my friend Victor Ferram from Goa, India. And we're going to pick up some interesting topic that we kind of alluded yesterday in various presentations about anonymity that Kierkegaard has used in his writings. So please, Victor.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Basilio, for inviting me for this conference. I am grateful to everyone for learning from everybody what's happening around us in all different parts of the world. At a time when fake news is ruling roost, a renewed interest in Soren Kierkegaard might help us to critically understand as well as consciously respond to it. Although communication scholars seem to have not invested much into Kierkegaard's model of communication in the past, today several scholars seem to have come to a heightened awareness that his thought can open us new ways of analyzing communication in a post-truth era. Kierkegaard wrote with several pseudonyms and communicated without authority of the author. In the wake of fake news in a post-truth era, we can trace not just writing without authority, but also writing without responsibility. The guise of pseudonyms provided a guise through which Kierkegaard presented aesthetic, ethical, and religious categories. Unfortunately, the guises provided by social media platforms seem to only make room for the aesthetical and provide little or no space for the ethical and the religious. Hence, in a country like India, where the aesthetical masks as the ethical under the garb of cultural nationalism of the right wing, the communication model of Kierkegaard is profoundly relevant. Today, we not only face challenges to the ethics of authorship, but we also have challenges to empower the reader or the receiver of communication, as it has led to gruesome mob lynching on several occasions. Hence, writing without authority and responsibility challenges us to build a culture of critical reception among our people. In an environment of fading ethics of authorship, we have an imperative to develop an ethics of reception or reader. We urgently need a new way of reading and responding to text that is produced and circulated in a post-truth era. This new way of receiving, reading and responding to the text that is produced and circulated opens an ethical relation to the reader or the receiver. Therefore, as Roland Barthes succinctly put, opens an ethical relation to the reader or receiver. As he says, the text's unity lies not in origin, but in its destination. We draw attention to the reader, receiver of the text and hope that his response would be guided by ethics of reception. In this project, Kierkegaard, who practiced the vanishing author to perfection in his writings, becomes a great inspiration for us to imagine a reader's response to a text in the absence of the author. We do not need to pay heed to ethics of authorship that chooses to communicate without authority and responsibility. The absent author opens the communicated text for an ethical reading with profound responsibility. The disappearing author calls the reader, receiver, to an ethics of reception. Today, more than ever before, we need an ethics of reception. The reader is challenged to take responsibility of being the author of his or her own readings of the text, which is often by the author in a post-truth scenario. Unfortunately, the absence of the author is also accepted by the reader without much complaints. Perhaps the amount and the speed at which we receive communication and information has something to do about a reader forgetting the author. Given this precarious condition, an ethics of responsible reception might be vital response to communication in our times. So as we look at this post-truth condition, which requires the receiver, the author, to become the new author and critically accept, I thought maybe, as Samuel yesterday requested me to talk about the illusion, way of becoming an anti-Oedipus. There's an interesting book written by Deleuze Gautari, Becoming. It's about anti-Oedipus, capitalism and schizophrenia. And in order to get into it, maybe we can do a Deleuze reading of our friend Soren, because he himself does not speak directly. All his communication I have is, I've done that part of his communication, which is indirect, which would mean that he does not audibleize in a normal fashion of communication. So he chooses an alternative. Now let me talk about what is audibleization. Audibleization would mean, if you remember Freud, he gave us the Oedipus complex. And we have the mother, the father, and the son. And so in that situation, when the son loves the mother, he finds the father as a rival, as well as not only rival, but one who can castrate him and kind of destroy him. And so it becomes a castration phobia, which leads the son to choose not to love his mother or to go into what Freud would say, into a kind of layout where he does not understand genitality or sexuality anymore. And so in this sense, latency is the stage where the son tries to adapt. And so what happens is the law of the father prevails. And Deleuze and Guattari is challenging us not to Oedipalize, become an anti-Oedipus, become kind of a rebellious child, one who would take on his father. If you look at the Oedipus complex from an Indian point of view, it is also interesting because let us say what we talk about Oedipus complex is a Greek myth, and we also have to look out for an Indian myth which would somehow speak to us closely and also tell us why our Indian media is silent or speaking to the gallery, speaking to our rulers. And so in this context, there is Sudhir Kakar, maybe Basilio knows him. He's an Indian famous psychoanalyst. And he has come out, interpreted Oedipus complex as Ganesha complex. And if you remember, Ganesha is God. His father is Shiva and mother is Parvati. And Parvati keeps him as a guard while she is taking bath. And Shiva comes with a sword because he's not allowing him to go. He cuts his head. And so this is again Mama Dada and the infant child and triangulates again like Oedipus complex. And so therefore in this context, what happens is in India we are afraid of losing our head. The Ganesha in us make us not to take on the power to be. Even in the church, I can't speak to that power to be, or I can't speak. So in some way, what is Oedipus complex becomes kind of what Lyotard might say is a discursive trauma. Discursive trauma is I say, but when I say there is a lot that is unsaid. And there is a lot unsayable. And so in everything that I say, there is also the unsaid and the unsayable. And so within this type of communication, I thought perhaps look at Kierkegaard, talking indirectly, leading us to a Socratic task, a task by which the reader or the listener to Socrates or the reader for Soren becomes the actual person who is free from any influence forced upon him by the author or by the person who is speaking in the case of Socrates. So the Socratic task enacted by Soren Kierkegaard becomes an ethical task for us today because we are facing an authorless text, a text where author does not write with his authority as an author and also does not feel responsible for the text. And so in this context, we now can draw inspiration from Soren Kierkegaard, who wanted the reader to do the Socratic task. And so in this context, the reader becomes the one who would respond critically and responsibly. While I accept Socrates and his theory of knowledge as virtue, I feel it's still limited. Because when I know, I will do. That's not a guarantee. My mind or intellectual dimension may not produce my ethical life. And so in that sense, Socrates and Socratic tradition, which we all sort of follow, has limitation. And that's why desire becomes important, the will becomes important, the voluntarist tradition of the Catholic Church. And today, with psychoanalysis, we have will, and how our will is manipulated by this text, by the images we were discussing just now, is also equally important. And so, while Soren limits himself to Socratic tradition, perhaps we need to move beyond and take Lacan and take on Deleuze, who talks about how desire is getting triggered and produced. The lack is being introduced by any advertisement that we see around. The images make me feel I am lacking something. And so my desire moves on. And my desire to have something and want something is generated, sociologically engineered by these texts. And therefore, it would be important to move beyond Socrates so that we can equip our readers and the audience to respond ethically. And so, in this sense, I thought, and I'm grateful to you, though I did not introduce Deleuze within this because I was trying to be within Socratic and within a Soren tradition. I thought this is an important takeaway from yesterday's discussion, that we need to also look at how our will is getting manipulated, and perhaps maybe even Descartes, who bowed down to the will as supreme in the case of God. Because when it comes to 2 + 2 is 4, it's not because it is only intellectually very coherent, but because God wants it to be so. And so God's will became more supreme, and God could make 2 + 2 9, and perfect mathematics could happen. And so these possibilities of multiplying mathematics with God's will becomes rather perfect and more powerful in terms of thinking about God. Taking from a rationalist like Descartes. Of course, we have also John Duns Scotus, who always spoke about the will of God is more perfect than his intellect. Of course, these are debatable issues. Some of us may tilt towards the will, others will tilt towards the intellect. The intellect takes us to the Socratic tradition, the will takes us to the psychoanalytic and schizoanalytic traditions that we are now discussing. And so therefore, we need to take both together, I thought, to empower the reader as well as the distributor. Now, in order to arrive, that's why I put that reception, not the reader, though I read reader, but my heading is ethics of reception. And in that sense, I want to include also the distributor, who may distribute a text mindlessly, which is he receives, whether on Facebook, whether on any other social media like WhatsApp. And so in this context, I thought perhaps to look at how, I don't become the other of the same. If there's no author, I don't have to be exactly author. In other words, if you go back to Luce Irigaray, another student of Lacan, who sort of was trying to understand feminism, and she was critiquing another feminist before her, Simone de Beauvoir. And Simone de Beauvoir wrote that famous book, The Second Sex, to tell us and to remind us we are not living in a woman's world. We only know one sex, that is male, and we privilege, and that becomes the vantage point from where we see the world. And so to remind us that there is the other, the second sex, Simone de Beauvoir wrote. But here, I was talking about Luce Irigaray. She's outraged by this title. She says, I am not second to the first. You're already playing the game by the rules of the male domination. And so you are other of the same. You have become other of the same. And often in politics, I see, talking from my own country, there's nothing to choose between Congress and BJP. They are other of the same. It is the benchmarks are same. Or for that matter, if you ask me, RSS, which is the right-wing Hindutva, it is the other of the colonizer, other of the same. If the colonizer had a religion, they do have a religion. If the colonizer had a language, they have Sanskrit. If the colonizer had a civilizing mission, they do have a civilizing mission. The matter is us, Indian, form is colonizers. Obviously. So they are put together, they have become other of the same. And so in that sense, as a response that I'm seeking from the reader cannot be other of the same. In other words, the author who has left and abdicated his responsibility cannot decide for me in a way to be ethical. I may mirror his concerns and his ways. And that's where I feel Deleuze and Guattari's ways of talking about anti-Oedipus becomes useful. What it does, let me again use imagery of the feminist discussions. That is about if we Oedipalize, if we say the author-centered meaning, which we don't accept at all, the author is dead, but if we accept the author-centered meaning, then that is the only phallus which is fertile. And no other interpretation is possible. So every other phallus has to imitate or become this so-called the author, echo the author meaning. You can't, or repeat the author meaning. You can't be creative with the text. You can't be deconstructive with the text like the reader. You can't talk back. And so in that way, Oedipalization destroys possibilities. Like for example, in India, I have done a schizoanalysis of Brahminism. There's only one phallus that is fertile. Everyone has to become Brahmin. Caste castrates us, literally. Caste ranks us where we belong. Caste is rating us where we belong in society. And also castrates me from becoming myself. And I have to become in the image and likeness of the Brahmin. That's the only way I know to be what is called human. And so in this way, we have difficulties of mirroring the author. And that's why we cannot have the single phallus, which is enthroned in some way. And that's where Oedipalization is actually singularizing of phallus, which is fertile. Could we hop on to other possibilities, open other possibilities of being readers, being distributors of text? And so that's where this possibility is open. And I would suggest in my writing, there are three important directions that we could take in whilst we ride waves which are other and which can produce possibilities which are beyond either or, as you are either author or a reader, as Kierkegaard would want us to transcend and take a leap. And so in this point of view, I thought we have to do what is called distanciation. We have Paul Ricoeur talking about distanciation. And distanciation brings us to reflect on what is given. And this is an important act of receiving. I don't just receive blindly. I distance myself from the text that is coming to me from any direction. I welcome it, but I look at it from a distance mediated reflection. So I reflect. The next point is hermeneutical suspicion, or the hermeneutics of suspicion. It's interesting to bring in suspicion, yes, but suspicion can be debilitating, can be destructive. But when it is brought with hermeneutics, it is brought closeness. The distance and closeness is brought together and it can be productive. And finally, the responsibility of the self to the other, which was so primary for Soren Kierkegaard in ethics of the other. Of course, in this case, we are not talking about the self is drawn into an egology of Levinas, but the self that is drawn to the other, because I'm receiving a text for a responsible task. I'm not distributing it just because I received it. I'm critically accepting it, and I'm doing it before the other with responsibility. Thank you.
Before Nilesh tries to present, because his topic is going to be much more in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little discussion about it right now, rather than waiting for it.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask questions.
I found what you said very interesting because especially on an open forum like Facebook or Twitter, we so easily receive this information and don't necessarily look towards the author for their guidance. Like we see what they write, their content, if we connect with it in some way, then we just distribute it and keep some things. We don't necessarily focus on the facts behind it or care to look to it because technology moves so fast already. So I found that very interesting, saying that not only should we be responsible, but we should distance ourselves. We should be suspicious of it. We should definitely not distribute it just because we can, just because we have that power.
Just building on this comment, which is fairly profound, I think, Victor, that you bringing up desire in this context is crucial. One of the things, the difference that I think between Lacan and Deleuze and Guattari on desire is, for Lacan, desire starts with lack, and you spoke about this briefly. For Deleuze and Guattari, desire is about plenitude and proliferation, very productive. And I wonder if part of the dilemma here is that lack seems to be missing in the social media context. Because lack in the Lacanian sense would be what gives the subject some space for this kind of hermeneutic reflection. Maybe what Ricoeur was doing with distantiation, to give some distance between themselves and the text for reflection, which Kierkegaard would certainly approve of. And I'm reminded of not Deleuze and Guattari, but Lacan on this point. In Seminar 10, he talks about what happens when lack, the object cause of desire, is itself lacking. And the word for this is, when it's missing, is anxiety. Anxiety this is his diagnosis of anxiety. It's when you can no longer desire in a normal fashion because someone else's desire has stepped into that lack and filled it up. And objet is just gone, can no longer be located, can no longer be sought. And I wonder if that's part of the dilemma as we're retweeting, reclicking, forwarding, and engaged in this like economy, is that the lack that is so constitutive of desire and reflection is gone. And now what we have is just anxious thumbs and anxious index fingers.
Maybe I thank you for this insight. It's important to understand why do we keep forward. Looking at your numbers and this lack pushing us towards that clicking. So perhaps we have to work on this dimension and see how we can have some insight into this. Everyone is involved in blind, unreflective forward.
Just to add to that comment as well, I don't know how we're doing on time, but I believe it really has to do with the culture. Like there's always this desire to, not only be the one person that people follow or people agree with, but it's also that content of being controversial and then that topic blowing up into something much bigger and on the global level. So I think desire for people liking us or people following us it's kind of like that God complex in a sense, where it's like we need to be the ones that everyone watches.
Yeah, I mean, desire can be seen in multiple points, perspectives. One way of lack, but they use it, and alternatively, verticalizing in the lack. If you can rise beyond the lack and seek more, there are other alternatives possible. And so, desire is productive in that sense. We can ride many tigers, to put it in my terms, but I'm happy with one. And that's where I auditalize. I have a lot of anxieties and fears and frustration, focus. Better to rise above and see alternatives.
Thank you very much for your but then look at to ask you a question about the post-truth era, you only studying about you never going to so if you can just say something more about what you mean with post-truth era. We talked yesterday about the post-empirical knowledge, and then we talked about post-truth. So what do you exactly mean this one?
Post-truth era is where truth is no longer one, nor significant enough for all of us. So it has become relativized and produced socially and by power. So in some way, we cannot stop this phenomenon. That's what I thought. And the reader is more important than the producer, because these people have become anonymous. We cannot move and check where they are, but certainly I have the responsibility of receiving it and then putting it forward. So this way, I thought reader is more important than the author today. The author is dead, and post-truth era has done the funeral of the author. So there is no way of resurrecting the author anymore.
I have a very odd question, actually I have two. Uniquely in the context of India, I think that you have this program called Aadhaar, this foundation, like data collection system developed by the government. What do you think are, because I see it as like this very interesting variation of Big Brother. And my question is like, how do you think Aadhaar will evolve, and how will it affect capacity for authorship and reflection? Do you think it's going to be very negative or going to be neutral for the next couple of years?
I feel Aadhaar is negative. I have written around that. Yes, Aadhaar is a panopticon. Panopticon means you have heard of panopticon. Panopticon is power that sees everything. Aadhaar becomes panopticon in a sense. It is a simple number that allows the Big Brother, as you say, to lock every possibility. I cannot fly to, suppose tomorrow I have to fly, here. I will not be able to fly if that number is given to any. Oh, so my whole accounts, bank accounts can be closed. Every access that I have for help can be locked. So this is putting too much power in few hands. So it's quite dangerous. Though they say in a country like India, there's a lot of corruption, the middleman is going to cheat us, and therefore they will directly give us money into our account. We have to access it through Aadhaar, so that nobody else can take it. So all access to health also is through Aadhaar card. But there's other side. If I'm not acceptable to a kind of regime, then I will be in big trouble.
It seems like this remarkable new form of counting, like this, what you were discussing yesterday, this counting, like how does this extraordinary counting mechanism? It reminds me of like this, I don't think it's a constant, but this constant shift in Indian philosophy from like, to put it in the bluntest sense possible, like Mimamsa to Dvaita Vedanta, the shift from like, ritual and structure to liberation. And it goes back and forth and it goes back and forth. And I see Aadhaar as, for me, as a sort of ritualization of the counted person and recreating the sort of new, like Mimamsa school, but in a very broad, sort of seemingly neutral way. And I think it's a very, I would also say dangerous, trend, but I'm wondering how you view it in the context of future.
It has been struck down by the government, by the Supreme Court, because any institution will ask us Aadhaar card, like a bank is asking Aadhaar card. Any institution that we want to go, simply they ask Aadhaar card. Some people, it's quite funny. Some who supply prostitutes, those fellows also ask Aadhaar cards. It's quite an interesting situation. So the Supreme Court says Aadhaar card cannot be used for everything, particularly banking. Right. It's only for government and government institution, no other.
It's creating a precedent.
Yes, yes. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Now I'm really delighted to introduce our student presenter, Nilesh Rastogi, and he worked with his Professor Kierkegaard. I'm supposed to count, right? Anyway, yeah, but Nilesh is the kind of guy who can manage by himself. So he's a computer science student, and I had the pleasure of doing research with him last year on ethics and algorithms, and he developed an algorithm for deliberation algorithm, how to deliberate. And so, Nilesh, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Let me just change the wall. Okay. All right. I think we're good. All right. So today my topic is about how can we analyze fake news from a natural language perspective, which is a very broad field within computer science for analyzing textual data, but more from a mathematical and algorithmic perspective. So what we are trying to do is, try to see if there are certain patterns within the fake news, if there are certain ideas, certain styles, writing styles, which are very unique within the fake news itself, which can identify fake news whenever we try to analyze, a bunch of data itself. So it is very from a big data perspective, but at the same time, what we are trying to do is identify what will logically make sense when we are trying to identify what is fake news. Because fake news has recently developed in the term was taught in 2015 to 2016. So it's a very, very, I'll say, young research being done right now. So just to go over the table of contents before I proceed into how did we go on to find a way to classify fake news from real news and distinguish between those two from a natural language perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about what is fake news from a natural language perspective and why are we choosing NLP for this particular problem. We're going to talk a little bit about the data set, what kind of data set has been developed so far and what we are using, and the methodology for what we have done and what kind of methods did we use. Then a little bit on our accuracy, how accurate were we in classifying fake news from real news. We're also going to talk a little bit about that. And then we will go over into the conclusion and the future works, which we will be going over as well. So first question, what is fake news? We already know what fake news is. It's some kind of news which is spread all around the world, but at the same time, it does not really have a credible source or a credible storyline to it. And it usually conveys a wrong message. But from a natural language perspective, this particular topic is very interesting because fake news in most of the terms is written in nature. So any written text is natural language for us. So what we find is that from a computer science perspective is that if anything is written in text, we can identify certain patterns within that text and see if those patterns they repeat over time, or do they show up in future fake news. Because it might not be a possibility they might show up, but we can come up with a certain accuracy statement that it may show up in future as well. So why not we try to identify patterns from natural language perspective and see what's happening. So few people already did that. This research has been something which is a really firestorm within few of the conferences within Stanford, MIT, and to go with to go on to the data set, what I want to show you guys is that this particular data set was developed by Stanford in 2017, where they collected all of these fake news articles and manually labeled them if they were fake or real. Now, if you can see right over there, this is our original label data from the actual data set. So what you're seeing over here is that they labeled it as true, mostly true, half true, barely true, false true, or pants-fire, which is basically false. So what they try to do is basically manually classify that if this particular news actually had a source or not, and which is actually very good for us, because that way we can go with certain assurance that whatever we are analyzing is fake. We do not have to ponder upon the fact that whatever we are analyzing by the end of the day, is it fake or not. So we use that particular label, and we kind of converted that into just true and false. And you can see the basic comparison right up there, that true, mostly true, and half true got converted to true, because we assume that if it's half true, it's still proper news. It's not fake news. But if it's something like pants fire, that's obviously false, but something like which is barely true can be considered as false as well, because that is not valid throughout the whole societal prospect. So we found that particular data set, and we found that, okay, that data set had like around 11,000 articles, and then we tried to add a few more articles onto it. So we ended up having somewhat around 11,340 news articles, which are all fake. And they are also consisting of real news as well. So from a data science perspective, what exactly did we do from this particular data set? Now, the thing is, as we can see that this data set was really, really accurate for us, but we also wanted to analyze some more things onto it. So what we did is that we collected our real news data from this particular website called webhost.io, which allows you to collect all these news articles from like different sources in like minimal amount of time. And once we collected all that data, we ensured that we did not include any articles from a questionable source. So we were not including any articles from like a blogger, which is like very questionable blogger. We don't even know who the author is or something like that. But we took like the most credible sources like New York Times, Washington Post, Forbes, and etc. to be part of this particular data set, which we already know is supposed to be real because it's published by credible news sources, and which kind of can still be a gray area for us, because we do know that fake news is sort of a gray area. We do not really know if fake news could be real or false, even though if it's classified as real or false. So our final data set included around 23,000 real articles and 11,000 fake articles. Then here comes the fun part. So as I said, from natural language prospect, what is our job analyzing this data set? We found that, okay, we can actually find certain patterns, and this is like the basic process which you will always go with whenever you're approaching it from a natural language processing method, where you are removing all the stop words like some, there, which, removing all the white spaces like like @ mentions, if there was any mentions in like a blog post or something. You also limitize the word, so you do not have any tense within the text. You do not have playing, or you do not have anything like played. You always have the verb itself, or the noun, which is play, or who I am. There's no past, present, or past and future. There's only present tense of that particular word when we limitize it. And then we use the n-grams, which is basically trying to say we combine all these words together to find what kind of patterns could be generated, what words came out together a lot, to find that what might be the writing style. So once we are done with that, we wanted to convert our text to features. So basically by features, we mean that something which can allow us to further down the road classify this particular text as fake news. So these are the two mathematical functions, TF-IDF and word2vec, which we use, which allows us to convert every single word into numbers. As computer scientists, we love numbers. So numbers is something, when it shows up, we love analyzing that. So these are the two particular functions which we use to analyze what they do. Now, just to go briefly over on those two functions which we use, what is TF-IDF? So TF-IDF is called term frequency and inverse document frequency. So the way we converted every word into particular number is by seeing how many times that word appeared within one page of the document and how many times that word appeared throughout the document. And multiplying both of them, we get a number. So that's one way of doing it, and this is like very, very credible and cited algorithm which is being used by many other researchers. And we find that, okay, this kind of method is actually very good for converting words to numbers based on whatever corpus we have. And then this was a result for the real articles. And just to give you a brief, this particular whole data set was during 2015 and 2016 time. So you will see a lot of Trump, Hillary Clinton, emails, because Hillary Clinton was like, being being like, said that, okay, like whatever emails you have, you were sending emails to some people, and most of the fake news were around that particular news itself. So you can see a lot of words coming up like Trump, Clinton, then there was like a lot of words like Russia coming in, because there was like a news about like Russia is like, affecting the voting process. But then United States, like they were able to like, make Trump win for some reason, which still is not verified yet. So it can consider to be real article, but at the same time, it also pops up in the fake articles as well, but not as frequent as it does in real articles. So in fake articles also, you can see that Russia does pop up, but it's all in the bottom. Just like in fake articles, Russia was not that much of a predominant word coming up, but Trump, Clinton, Hillary, and then Russia was on the top too. So you can see that there was a lot of Russia coming in, but not Russian. And there was a lot of Russian is not even there in this data set. So it's like what we found that, okay, Russia is actually coming into the fake articles, and Russia is also coming in real articles. So there was both real and fake news about them, which we can presume for now. And then we move forward, we want to like, try to solidify whatever we are coming up with. So what we came up with was this Word2Vec, which is another really awesome tool created by Google, which allows you to convert all the words. But as I said, remember TF-IDF, it's worked a similar manner, but in this case, instead of analyzing just the corpus we have, it analyzes along the Google News dataset, which is billions of words. So obviously the accuracy of those numbers for us does matter. So Word2Vector is a very good source for finding converting the words into numbers, and then further utilizing it for our analysis. So this is how we were. Now we have like those two kind of numbers. We want to classify it. We want to run certain machine learning algorithms onto it and identify if we can actually come up with a model which can give a certain accuracy that it's a fake news or if it's real news. So in our classification modeling, we were first trying to like, score like whatever we just got from TF-IDF and Word2Vec. How good does the accuracy come out, or how well are we in classifying the news? So just to give you like a quick overview, this part is very important so this is something which we call is confusion matrix, which allows us to identify if it's actually classified properly, if it's not classified properly, or if it's classified wrongly, or if it's the right way of classifying it. So if you read that particular 4 bullet points, you will understand what exactly is true positive and false negative, because those words will come more in upcoming slides. So true positive is fake news classified as fake. False negative is fake articles which are classified as real. And then real articles, if they're classified as fake, they are false positive. And if real articles are classified as real, they are true negatives. So now going further, we see after running a lot of, bunch of computer science stuff, we see that, okay, our particular, this logistic regression model, which is one of the training models to identify, like classifying the data itself, was one with the highest accuracy, but still, it's 88%, so I still have like 22% chance of being wrong. Well, that is not good. If I'm making a model, I want to be at least like, 95% sure that, okay, this is happening, because if 5% anything happens, I can just give it like, it's a hit and try. But 95% I'm accurate that this is fake news. Now that kind of a model is very, very, very good for classifying fake news in future. So once we found that, we want to like do some more stuff onto it. So we did topic modeling. So what does topic modeling actually means? So topic modeling, in the most layman term, it means that when you want to identify what's the topic of the article without even reading the article. Now how fun is that? You don't want to read a book, but you know what genre it is. So that's exactly what natural language processing allows us to do. So we want to identify the topics of that particular article and see like what kind of topics were predominantly coming up in the data set, and what kind of topics can be utilized further in future to classify fake news as well. So the way it works is the same way we did like our TF-IDF at converting words to numbers, but this time we are also doing topics with words all combined together, which is one of like a really cool method called latent direct collect allocation, which is like very, very popular algorithm to convert a bunch of words into topics and identify which topic comes very, very predominantly in the data set. So this is how the graph actually kind of looks like. So we find that, okay, Trump was actually one of the major guys in this whole particular center of fake news prospect, even in real news and even in fake news, because there was a lot of fake news coming around Trump, because he was the one who was on stage and said that you're fake news, you're real news. But that particular statement itself does not identify what is fake and real, but what identifies is that what has been published by actual authors who are credible in nature and who do have a history of publishing real news out there. So based on that particular topic, we found that, okay, that this particular second group right over here consists all of these words all together in this particular segment, and it kind of looks more consistent in nature. But all these other words right over here are different type of also groups which could be generated from this algorithm, but those are very inconsistent in nature when the words do pop up. So we are going to stick with the second form for identifying, okay, these words do pop up a lot, like Trump, Clinton, election, vote, and then we have campaign, and then we have the state, then we have Obama also coming in there. And as I said, this whole data set is from 2015 and 2016 time. These words are very, very, very popping in those kind of news. And then moving forward, we also want to check out like certain, like the lowest words. Like, because the thing is, those keywords like Trump, Hillary might not pop up in future, but certain words like these might pop up in future. So what we found that, okay, words like, film, movie, Hollywood does have a lot of fake news around them. Then we have like actors, then we have stories, awards, directors, and if these words do pop up along with other words which are also associated with them within fake news, we can with certain accuracy classify that, okay, this might be a fake news. Even though we are not saying that this is fake news, we are just saying this might be fake news. So it's still up to the person, human intelligence, to classify if the news as fake or not. So this is the frequency ratio of the most fake words. So Hillary came up in the most of the fake news. Then war came in most of the fake news. FBI came in most of the fake news. There was also like a sort of kind of news articles going in like North Korea having nuclear bombs and stuff like that. We might go on a war. Most of those were fake news, but some of them were actually real. So it's hard to classify what was real and what was fake until and unless it's verified from the White House, which we actually got from policyfacts.com. So that actually gives you what both left and the right wing are giving out to the world. And those are supposed to be real news because they're coming out from the government. So this is what our most fake words look like. And then after all that analysis, one thing which we as computer scientists love to do is combine all the things which we just did in one place and see how it turns out. Like, it's literally art. Like, you have all these pieces and all these ideas, you want to combine it all together and see what's the masterpiece you can come up with. Even though it's like the worst thing you ever did, but it is something you did. So the final model had everything from predictions from 7 original models which we had, which is all these naive Bayes, logistic regression, all the numbers you saw before. And then we had distribution across 20 topics. As I said, the topic modeling itself. And then we have the length of the article. That's also another major big factor, because some of the times length of the articles can suggest if it's a fake news or if it's real news. And if the article has an author, that's like the endmost statement. Say if something is classified as fake news, but it does have an author, probably in future I can say that, okay, if this author is publishing fake news, then it might be a possibility that he publishes fake news again. But if this author is publishing real news, like something from New York Times, then this could be a real author. But this kind of author that has author thing does not work always, because there are anonymous authors as well. So we want to stick with the first 3 models rather than the last one in all the cases. So what this particular map just shows you is that if we apply all these 4 models, we are pretty much covering every single aspect which we could think of as of now to classify fake news. And based on that, when we did our analysis onto it, as you can see that our particular precision came out to be 98%. And with another method called naive Bayes precision, it came out to be 82%. And so did our recall and F1 score. And as you can see, as I said, if you guys do remember about the true positive and the true negative, you can see that if they were predicted real, they're actually real. So predicted real is what we did. Actual real is what the data set had. And we were able to classify around 4,665 articles as real compared to the other 50, which were classified as real, but they were actually, which were predicted as fake, but they were actually real. And then we have the actual fake, which is 34. But they were predicted real, but they were actually fake, but we predicted them real. So that's kind of like a flaw. As you can see, we're just 98% accurate. As I said, we cannot say, yes, this is fake news. We can only say, this may be fake news. And then 2,174 articles were actually predicted fake and they were actually fake. So our goal is to maximize these two places and minimize these two places in numbers prospects. But if you're able to minimize it to 0, well, I'm a Nobel president. If I do that. But yes, that's our whole analysis. Our future work will actually include to have sentiment analysis, where we will be trying to identify the most frequent sentiment which is coming up with fake articles. We might be able to use that as one of the classifying features to see if sentiment of say anger or sentiment of something very funny is coming a lot in fake news articles, and we might be able to use that feature to further reduce that score from 34 numbers of fake articles to which were classified as real but they were actually fake to something say to a 20, something say to a 28. We also want to identify the writing style, which is also very crucial, seeing how the author is writing. That's one of the major big things also we want to do. We also want to identify, we're going to revisit our pre-processing part too, because as I said, I'm still a student. I'm not a perfect guy out there. I'm not a guy who created something. I'm a guy who's applying it. So it's better to go back into whatever I did and try to see if I did miss something. If I did miss a clue, did I miss something? Is there something I could add? So that's one more thing I want to add into that. Then there are bigrams, trigrams, and foregrams. That's basically seeing if 2 words come together a lot, if 3 words come together a lot, if 4 words come together a lot within an article, and seeing how many times they do come together in an article and identifying if those particular aspects do affect our model. And capitalization is another thing. As you guys might have noticed, we removed every single capital word and converted them to lowercase, which is bad in certain areas. But for us, it worked so far. But we also want to see what are the results when you capitalize them and we, analyze them then. But sometimes you might put it in lowercase if it's a noun. Nouns are supposed to be in capital letters. So by English grammatical sense, there might be certain things which we want to take care of, tweak it, and see what it comes out to be. Even though if it's lesser than what we actually got right now, we might just ignore it. If we got something more than what we got right now, well, then we might include it. So those are our future processes of work, and hopefully by the end of this whole research, we might be able to come out with a proper classification model which can classify fake news and further, and probably implement a web app which can allow us to identify if all these articles out there, are they fake or are they real, and become a primary source for people to actually go and see if they're fake or real as a tool search. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, please bombard me with all the questions. And,
Yes.
So this research is very, very helpful
Mhm.
and in some aspects, and I really appreciate work going on with this because it's really important in the time that we live in now. My question to you is, how would you apply this in giving advice to the ordinary user? Because you did have certain words, but again,
Right.
media changes, news is always coming
It
out,
changes.
always
It's
evolving.
nothing static. Yes.
Yeah. So in terms of the authors that you found or
Mhm.
the sources that you did, can you create a definitive and say they normally post fake news? So
Yeah. Oh, something something with an accuracy, just say that this guy is all fake, so don't listen to him.
yeah,
Or this
yeah,
particular
or like-
username is all about fake news, so don't listen to that.
yeah,
I'm
or like
getting
a
a question
comment,
right.
yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, no, we can actually do that. That's one of the big things. So right now it's all just analysis. We haven't implemented anything big machine learning or deep learning onto it. Because once we do that, we might be able to identify certain patterns which we as humans could not see, but the machine could be able to see that. And once we have that kind of a model implemented on top of this particular whole data set, we might be able to, modify the data set or have our own data set being created with time and, manually being verified by a bunch of people. And seeing that, okay, if it's fake or real, because you're right, it is dynamic in nature, it's not static, because as you saw that the data set we analyzed was all about Trump and Clinton and everything, but that data set just allowed us to identify that what is fake news itself, try to see what kind of things might be very, very predominantly coming into fake news. Now, I'm not saying that this data set will remain static in nature, it will modify in future, but the thing is, the model which we came up with is just this data set just helped us to create a model. I'm not saying that this data set is a primary pillar for having a model, because if the data set doesn't exist, the model will not exist. Because once we have a model, we can use that model to identify fake news in future, with certain accuracy, and obviously we can actually tell users with like certain accuracy, not with like actual statement that okay, this guy's fake, because we do not want to get a lawsuit. Because if that guy's real, then we are getting lost.
Primarily, it's up to the user to use their judgment and to
Right.
fact that.
So all AI is all about is helping the user rather than taking over the user. Because there's like a whole other topic onto this, that is AI going to take us over? No, it's not. It's only going to help you and assist you. That's like the major big foundation, because everything is human assistive in nature and human centric in nature. And right now the current trend of the whole industry is about assisting people rather than like actually taking over the jobs, which is never anybody's goal, even though it's very helpful. But no one wants to do that, because we want to have total economics working hand by hand with like this whole computer science industry. So that's one of the big aspects. Like this thing is only going to be an assistive tool rather than like, being like a primary source of telling you that no, this is fake, this is real, this is fake, this is real. We don't want that. This might be real, this might be fake, this might be real, this might be fake. That's something that you want to do. It's similar to like if you are trying to predict future stock market prices. That's a similar way you will do that. You might say that, hey, you know what? You might want to shift from this stock to this stock because it might go down. It might go down. It doesn't say it will go down. So that's the only thing. It's like all about predictions and probabilities, and we cannot go with 100% accuracy, because as I said, if I do, then I'm a Nobel Prize winner. And I will basically solve every single problem in the world if that thing works.
I came in a little late. So,
Yes, sir.
if you addressed this earlier,
Mhm.
then just tell me and I will be sure.
Okay.
It's a comment and a question. First comment is, it seems to me that in the process of doing your analysis, you have to start from a position where you have already decided what is fake news and what is not.
Right.
Okay. So that means that having already made that decision,
Mhm.
behind that decision, there are all kinds of hidden things that you haven't talked about.
Right.
Once you have made that decision, what you're really doing then is setting up a very elaborate digital way of figuring out what the convention for fake news is.
Yes.
What you've given us so far isn't terribly convincing, because all the things I saw only had nouns.
Yes. You're right.
There were no syntactical structures at all.
That's a future
You
word.
didn't even
You're right.
suggest that there would be. What you said that there was things of 4 items.
Yep.
They're not necessarily syntactical structures.
Yes.
Syntactical structures generate meaning in their system.
Right.
So the second part of this is a question.
Mhm.
If I were a really clever user, couldn't I use this to generate perfect examples of fake news?
Yes, you can.
Ah.
Yes, you can. But at the
So
same
what
time,
is this?
at the same time, the thing is like, if you are like, say, you do know the whole source code, and then you know like what you're doing is wrong. You are generating fake news using an algorithm which looks like very real, but it's fake at the same time. You can do that. You can do that. I'm not saying you cannot. And there were softwares which allowed you to, superimpose faces onto like news people, because they were able to analyze like, okay, how can you have facial matches? And there were articles which were generated by bots which looked so real that they were classified as real, but they were fake. But at the same time, that kind of a question goes into the ethics of the how the program is used. And most of the times when we find as programmers, we do like very, very like in layman manners, like we do not really talk a lot about that. We do have like in a card within every single computer scientist, but we do have like a computer science card, kind of like this sort of like inbuilt within our education system, which just teaches that, okay, this is like something if you do use, is bad for the community, and if it's bad for the community, it should be withdrawn from the use itself. So that's kind of a something rule which we do follow internally. But to answer your question, you're right about the semantic part, because that semantic thing is which we are working on in the further, which will also include all the past, present, and future, which will include all the grammatical tenses and everything, which will allow us to identify it. But at the same time, if somebody wants to use this particular algorithm to like say create a fake news, right now this algorithm is not that perfect to make it, but say in future it does become perfect and somebody's using it, the only way to resolve that issue is by withdrawing this particular software from to the market and having somebody else analyze these created fake newses to see what kind of, like, did they miss a gap? And can we exploit that gap and tell that, okay, no, this is fake news? Because as you mentioned that it is all dynamic in nature and it's not static. So even our news can be dynamic in the future. And then they can be, crucified in nature and like, hey, whatever you're doing, right, is wrong, and we have been using it to create wrong news, and this is gonna, affect this whole society kind of thing. And this is something which is like a really, really worst dream I could ever dream of for myself. Like if something like that happens, I'm losing my job. I know it does happen every day, but that's the only way. Like you can protect it using security measures, have certain security measures within your code itself, which is not released to people. What? Yeah. No, but it's like, like people are still working on it. It's like, as I said, it's like the ethics part of it is very, very questionable in nature as of now, because we came up with that result as well, that there's no pillar ways of identifying that these morals and ethics will be static throughout whatever we do. Even though we do say it, there's no way of doing it, because the morals change from place to place. Some places, crucifixion was bad, but at some places it was identified part of religion, which is kind of like saying that it's morally incorrect for me, but morally correct for you, which is a conundrum. So moral change with the places where we are staying in, and the computer science being expanding all throughout the world, we do want to have ideally like a pillar statement saying that, okay, you cannot use it, but people do use it. So it's like something which we as one person cannot stop, but as a big infrastructure can have the power to stop it on their end. But they do have those reaches within. But hopefully I did answer the question. Okay.
I have a kind of follow-up question. I have the same issue that Bill does on syntax, but in a slightly different form. I mean, one could, in theory, take all the articles that are real articles, change the dates in all of them, and change the actual data that's quantitative, that it's not nouns and not words. And all those real articles would now be fake articles.
Okay.
But it would still pass the bar of being
real articles.
Right. And the problem you have here is the problem of meaning making. Which is that I don't know. Like my question to you is, I know that there's some attempts. There's a database called PsycL.
There is.
Of like a million associations. Like, do you know of any tool that is PsycL-ish that is attempting to extract common sense meaning? Because I just can't see a way to really have a reliable, true indicator of fake and true or falsehood and truth without some reference to meaning making. Is there anything like that you know of?
I'm trying to think.
This is the same issue that even if you wander into like Bluetext and Watson server and look at the kind of actual tools they offer, every single tool they offer is a meaning making less fundamentally. Like you got to look at what they're actually doing, right? The most sophisticated semantic analysis NLP offers, even on the best servers that I've seen, is still a meaning-making less tool. And it's a problem I haven't seen solved. I mean, you might know something. I don't know. PsycL is the closest.
I'm trying to think of it. The thing is like, so it was like a dynamic of questions you asked.
Yeah, but
so
the question is like, do you know something like PsycL that is trying to solve a problem? Because I can so easily falsify the entire database of true use by just changing the dates.
No, I do agree. But the thing is, at the same time, if somebody does that, right? Being a computer scientist, the first thing you do is manually go through the data set and see if it's like real or not, even though before you use it, right? So
you're
it's
not
like
doing exactly the problem, right?
Manually going through it is something. Like the thing is, if I show it to you, this particular data set, that liar data set is actually like a data set, and they actually mentioned the same problem in their particular paper, because it's like one of the most cited paper from Stanford as well, because it was recently published. But they actually mentioned about that their data set itself goes to a certain accuracy that yes, it's true or false, because they actually had people to go up to the sources and verify it. And this particular data set was created in a year, because they do have the resources to do it. But at the same time, what you're mentioning is that yes, it does take manual cross-verification, it does take manual work and tidiness to create a data set. And to say, if you say like, if I have a data set, I just change the dates because I'm like, awesome, I just want to like, get like my thing working.
Exactly, but the fact that someone has to manually cross-verify.
Yes.
Exactly, I'm asking the question. Do you know anything?
If any software which can do it for us. So far, I will say no, but I think Professor Nikhil might be able to answer that question.
Yeah, I was going to raise my hand. So the premise of doing AI and data mining is that you need to have a training data set, right?
Mhm.
So you need to have like he has labels there with each text field.
Yeah.
You need to have that for you to build this model. So to answer your question, in real time, can that happen? It's very difficult. Right? So there's nothing out there that does this in real time. So say there's a new story, it's flagged as fake, right? First, how do you validate that the person who's flagging it is a valid source,
Mhm.
right? So this has to happen. I mean, this is an open research problem because
Yes.
it has to happen in real time. Whenever a story is posted on social media, someone tags it as fake, right? And that text, which is being labeled as fake, can now go into a data set. Where, well, ideally, we'd like it to be dynamic, and we'd like these models to be trained on such tagged information dynamically. But so far, there's not much work out there that's been done.
That's being done, and that's why it's like a place where people want to like hop into and do the research and identify if we can build a software like that.
There is another set of algorithms I'll talk about in my talk, but there is a set of algorithms called generative adversarial networks.
Yeah.
So it's similar to, well, think of someone trying to counterfeit currency, right?
Mhm.
So you have a good cop who's trying to catch these counterfeits, right? Because they have an idea of what the counterfeit looks like, right? They have the real data and then they have the counterfeit data. So there's like a feedback loop between people who are generating this fake data and people who want to catch it.
But both of those, whether you're using an adversarial network or like a convolutional network, they're all set down and they're not referential to some external like meaning making apparatus. Like this is what I've seen. That's what the question I'm asking. But like PsycAL, they're trying to do it. I don't know how successful they're. I have no idea. But PsycAL, they're trying to create this like set of three non-set bound associations like the 3 or 4 year old would have.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And this is the main problem, that no matter how good and how big or dynamic your set is, whether you're running an adversarial network or convolutional one, you're still set bound, and that set does not have a reference to external reality.
So that's it. That is a problem. That is
That's a fascinating limitation. I mean, and that's what I see as like, that's why I'm asking, like, do you know anything beyond PsycAL is trying to do it? Because
I mean, so far, if like honestly, like right now, currently, like me and Professor Nikhil recently went to like one of the premier conferences within natural language processing and artificial intelligence. And so far, the research we always saw was all about like debate analysis and everything like that. But this thing, something like fake news, hasn't been targeted that crucially, or that like that radically as of yet. And this is something which is like worth creating like a whole workshop for, and it's something to be like all the research to come in for.
So something you might be interested in is it's an open source tool called Machinebox.
Yeah.
So they have a bunch of tools which they claim that they can analyze fake news to 95% accuracy. But again, that I wouldn't take that because it's being trained on something that one
Mhm.
that adaptive nature is severely.
Is there? It's just like predicting stock market prices, but there's no way to verify if those stock prices are going to be up or down. So it's just like that, because fake news is dynamic in nature, as so is like stock price market data. So it's like the whole problem of having the machine learning algorithms to try to identify patterns in something which human mind cannot see, but a machine might be able to see it, or something which machine might be able to highlight to us, and we might be able to create a model based on those highlights which the machine told us, and try to identify if we can identify a pattern with human intelligence combined with machine intelligence. So as of yet, if there is a software like that, then I will be like, so far, like I'll try to replicate that software. Like that will be my benchmark software to go with, but I don't know if there's anything yet. So literally I'm like shooting in the dark and identifying this. Yeah, it is a shot in the dark. It is every single time when a problem like this comes up, it's a shot in the dark. So whenever we are trying to, identify a solution for that, it's something which can only come out from peer review and these kind of conversations which are happening right now, like your questions or something, which will help me build this model more perfectly so it can answer those questions as well, because one person doesn't, know all the questions. It comes with teamwork. So that's why this thing has to exist. So that's the main reason, like, why this whole presentation was done. That's the reason why these kind of like questions are coming up, because it's mainly very crucially asked questions as well. So thanks for the question though. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, let me introduce you to the professor.
Oh, okay.
So we'll take a break now for have a cup of coffee and go to the back there. That is for the Italians, there is special espresso.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if there was on how to walk with stuff. Lacan is looking at desire only as a language. And others will say desire can multiply desire. In that sense, not the space for that.
But there are certain synonymous sources and they are like very different. So as you saw,
This Thanksgiving.
Ethics of singularity.
Wednesday.
And the extent Soren says, and also the Derridian from America. He says he has talking the nutshell and he's taking the nutshell.
So that's the kind of article
Ethics of singularity. That's where he reaches the religious state. Like it was ethics of singularity. So what I see there are multiple options. Ethics of singularity comes in play rather than universality. Like Abraham was called skills, not everyone. So that kind of standing alone in front of us. So that is the religious, I believe, dimension of sovereignty. So in that sense, I felt when there are many roads to go, which you take perhaps is different.
all the time you're thinking around. Yes,
So that's where the singularity. So this is coming from the religion. We have been always common for all of us. But there, my business or my uniqueness can be. So some way that can adjust to the need of glorification. Can be simply one. Actually, only one of them. After the month. Yeah. So there are multiple options. But that multiple options are not for me, for him. So I have no problem with him if he chooses that much. Let me know if you remember who the teacher is. Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Particular thing is as like finally itself say why he falls identify itself only for one sector of the country, not part of the world itself. So that's a very bad market statement for but the thing is for this one, as you can see that the engagement for this one, so this views were automatically identified with unverified.
You should be proud of
Yeah. Within the White House. And people who
I made it. I made it.
Or I sort of been, oh, that's it, like, fake news is a great area.
That's that was the registration. People who already registered.
Professor, we need to.
Hey, George.
Hi, Professor. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for coming.
No, thank you.
I don't know if we can take one of those. Should we? I think we should.
Oh, that's cute.
I'm gonna take one.
Maybe you can. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Where is Goddard? I'm gonna ask her. I can take one of those. Maybe. This is nice.
How are you?
Yeah, because like they're promoting. There's a source to it, they're promoting. Yeah.
I'm assuming we can. Let me ask somebody if I can.
Can what?
Oh, we can take
That's
one.
Brazilian. He knows the answer.
Professor, can we take one of those, or that's for only for people who register online? Yeah, we can take it. Let me see. It's not.
So those kind of things can be done. If you don't mind, like say IoT or something like that have drones or something like that. Those are like certain ideas.
Oh, I mean,
I don't have
if it's some left at the end, just
I don't have one Brazilian. I can take one from there. No, that's what I want. Thank you. That's what I need.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I require.
How are you doing?
I'm good, yeah, working on my project.
Good. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I already started. Long time ago.
Yes, I'll talk to my office. If you don't, you're in trouble.
So this is like,
That's why I'm plus asking you. We had to create like
yeah,
categories to our analysis because I started to create them already.
Yes.
And I describe it through like a theory. That's
It's
why
your
I'm-
method, right? So
Yeah.
you don't have to do it, you have to tell me what the categories are.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you're fine.
Could be analyzed with this part. So it's like it can help you actually minimize your time in doing that whole research and search work. It can even, like, the thing is, when you talk about sentiment of it, you can even identify the style in which the author writes. And you can make like a profile of the author, even though the author doesn't exist. Author is anonymous, but there's like a certain profile of the author which you can make based on the sequence. Like he uses these kind of words, like say he uses colors with a U. He uses colors without a U or without a U. Or if he uses water or water. Water is like something. So they did the same kind of thing when it was like about I forgot the name of it. There was like this guy, what was his name? He was like a bomber, but then he worked on I forgot the name. It's like so this guy he wrote the manifesto and the only way to identify who this guy was by literally doing NLP onto that context, but not working on it, but that time they did not have it. Algorithms and machine doing it. But these algorithms and machines are very, very like similar to what that guy did as with Unibomber. So Unibomber, he made a manifesto, and the only way to identify Unibomber was to analyze his manifesto and create a profile of like what this guy is. Like this guy wrote the whole thing in the format of mathematical paper around 1990, so he must be schooled in 1990. And that means he's educated, that means he must have a PhD level of education. And then it had some places like where it says water, just like analyzing like you can with text you can identify what geographical location is. With text you can identify what kind of writing style it is. So sometimes writing style can actually tell a lot about person rather than like the way you write is the way you are. So like the place you grow up at. So like say if you're Italian, like if you're looking for something after you should be Italian. So I might be able to funnel down the search to Italy. That okay, this might be an article coming from Italy if you're an
Yes.
So this one can act as like fake news for like search for government news, but when it comes to like certain like say news articles like about hope coming from certain persons, you can make like a actual graph about that person, like use that person in like a biographical chart of like where this guy's from, where he's from, and if you identify that these kind of articles are coming majorly from this particular area and they're being fake news, you know that you can actually block those kind of fake news coming into your way because you know that they're coming mainly from this area. And then identify one by one. So machine learning can really help you identify certain aspects and help you reduce the time you're investing in identifying things. But it won't be able to tell you if it's fake or not. Okay, you got it. You got it. Okay, number Neil. I'm a senior computer science. Okay. Oh, so you're from here? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
But I still found it, so I'm saying just go there.
Okay.
But I was thinking about the intersection of, obviously, budgets as well.
That's the guy right there. Because he's like so the best way to actually get along with like because even though you're a student or you're interested in learning about yes, obviously you can sit down and talk about it. But mainly the research which is done is like focusing right here from like along with the professor who do main research so data thank you. Yes, for sure. We'll share our contact. So,
Bene, bene. Buongiorno, tu? Grazie mille, questo ragazzo è stato geniale.
Fantastico. So you can actually look on the website, HUAI.com, and you can sign up on the mailing list. I found it.
Oh, okay.
It didn't exist before I did. Yeah, it's HUAI.com. HUAI.com. Yeah, if you just look it up, you will be able to find us online and see what we do. And we do go over with like, even if we do have actually programming videos on trying to learn how to use in Python. So we do go over like how to code in Python. Oh, really? Oh no, he's like a student, so he's like a marketing student, but he does not know how to code, so we taught him how to code in Python, and we're teaching him how to do TensorFlow skills. So he's actually catching pretty good. Nice. So you do know Python and Java, so that's great. So you will be catching much faster.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. I mean, I'm still an amateur though.
Yeah, so next semester we will be doing like a lot of projects regarding like NLP. I think this semester we are wrapping it up. But next semester we will be actually focusing to the project. So we will be listing all the projects onto our website, so keep tab on the website. And then those projects will be the one where you will be a scientist. So you can go for 2 projects or 1 project based on the time. And you can select what project you like a lot and bring in the friends to. And then what we do is like we try to focus like certain time limit to every single work. So you guys are making progress and we can be up like a fellow page where you guys can manage the project. Yes. But yeah, that would be great. So what was the name again? Number? Yeah. Yeah, sure. It's yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, there's one more thing.
I should have a business card.
Yeah. He was.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Hi. Neil. You want me to meet you?
Yes, we can finish it.
Okay, I can meet you.
I'm here.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, he was very much preoccupied with this how his own position he was
Yes. So there is a way to figure out what a part of the article I think that as a focus on my will. So there's no like certain statement level over here. There's no like, sort of like there's no algorithm which you're saying that okay, so data postulate that this is true. Because all this data probability that it's not true. So there is a possibility of creating the article that this paragraph is true, this paragraph is false. Actually, if you see, you go see. Okay, so have you ever used this Turnitin software? So when you do go into your philosophy classes, you will be turning in your assignments and turn it in, and that actually grades every single paragraph. And it's like plagiarized or not. So that's a similar kind of algorithm as well. Could be plagiarized. It's the same algorithm working in the back. So yes, to answer your question, there is a possibility of claiming and tagging every single paragraph or line by line if it's taken. Line by line will take a lot of data, but paragraph by paragraph, that's not data. So it's very depends on the data.
Yeah, very good. In fact, very
Yes,
good.
very good. Thank you. You got it. So you're from CPS or CPS? Nice. What's your major? Journalism. Are you interested in computer science? Not really. Like, I mean, if you like these kind of things, actually, you should come to our program. So we don't really ask you if you should know coding, but if you do know, it's better. But if you do not know coding, that's fine too. Because we actually talk a lot about like all these researches going on within AI, machine learning, and deep learning in terms of natural language processing, computer vision, and audio. Because you're in journalism, you're dealing with multimodal data. As computer scientists, multimodal data means visual data, hearing data, and speaking data, and typing data. It's like basically whatever you write, speak, like whatever ways of communication that was a part of multimodal. So we deal with that a lot. So we actually talk about all these researches going on within this area, and we also talk about like how you can those are programs. So you can but you can attend like workshops where you go. So you go on to AI.com and sign up on the mailing list. So it's really great for you to be.
How are you?
It's
okay.
And the AI part, and talk about like how they don't teach you coding, but they talk about
I really enjoyed your
Yes.
good delivery, good content, and kind of taking a big idea in mind of location. Very nice.
okay.
Anyway,
Oh,
I gave you 10 minutes extra.
I know you did. I was about to wrap it up like 10 minutes before, but then I was like, okay, give me 10 minutes extra. I gotta like wrap it up in like 20 minutes or something.
I said, okay, no problem.
No, because I'm like known to work. He's from Lucknow. Yeah, Lucknow. Yeah. My mom is from Lucknow. Yeah. But I was born in Munich.
Let me check. Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
No.
This one, right? Yes, yes.
You're from Goa. Oh, so
are you sure?
same place.
And you don't have
Yes.
that? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, great, thank you.
You speak so nice. I went to Goa like when I was like 16 years old. It was like very fun. I went to like the church over there, and we lived like it was a very beautiful place to go. I might go there again. Like, but how's India? Like how's Goa? Very peaceful. Like Modi ji is doing a lot of things in Goa.
No, Modi ji, we are very united. Hindus, Christians, we are same blood.
Yeah, that's what I like. Because I learned religion, Christianity.
It's difficult to divide this.
I know.
Unless there are more North Indians coming right now and settling.
Yeah, well, that's a party culture.
So that's the problem. That can't create problems. But in a sense, we believe it.
Yeah. That is beautiful. Yes.
Usually, big articles on whatever. In India,
how are you doing? Good morning.
Yeah,
well, how was your night last night?
Yes.
Which is from Pakistan.
Yeah.
Or from Bangladesh or somewhere. And news is created out of
Yes. Out of the picture itself. So yeah, like Professor Michael, he is one of my professors. He's actually going over how we can automate in detail and analyze mistakes. He will be going over that. So that would be interesting. I gotta talk to a professor, but I'll come back and talk to you. I'll come back and talk to you. But Professor Nichols' whole presentation is about how do you analyze images, videos, and how do you identify
it
the
is
superimpose or not.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's start it.
It is so, yes, it's cold here. Tak, no. Nie, mam sobie to, ale myślę sobie, że mogą osoby się przeziębić. Nie martwisz się?
Ja w ogóle nie lubię bardzo.
Okej.
To jest płaszcz, najbardziej fajny płaszcz.
Nie, mam swój płaszcz.
Na pewno?
W razie czegoś mam.
Jak się czujesz?
Że
Dobrze się
to
bawisz?
jest takie normalne, że ty pytasz o to ciągle? Troszczysz się o nas, czy to jest...
Bardzo. Bardzo.
To bardzo miłe. Fajny dzień dzisiaj, w ogóle będzie cieplutko. Jest już ciepło. Jedziesz po południu do miasta z nami?
Tak, ja może bym to wieczorem, wiesz, jak będzie fajnie.
Cudownie.
Ja muszę wam
Cudownie. Czy byś przyjechał tam? Super. No to fajnie, byśmy mogli razem wracać. Cudnie, to powiem Annie, Ania, wie?
No powiedziałem coś więcej.
Cudnie. Fajnie. Co, zadowolony jesteś? No fajnie to idzie, fajnie się udaje i
Jestem
zabawiony. Tak, z panem Galifo rozmawialiśmy o eukaliptusach, które są jak bomby.
I know.
Mam się pytanie, czy można powiedzieć, a wy, Anny, czy jest takie coś, że może być tak w formie dualizm, czy nie? To nie istnieje. Jest forma dualizm? Jak to działa? Wiem, że to coś jest dualizm.
Ale w jakim sensie wy,
Tak,
Anny?
wy Anny, obydwoje.
Wy, Anny, obydwoje, ale coś zrobicie?
Tak, czy wy, Anny, wiecie na czy to jest poprawne?
Poprawne semantycznie, ale
Ale to jest poprawne tak logicznie. Tak,
semantycznie jest okej, właśnie
Tak?
logicznie jest okej, ale to jest...
tak się nie mówi.
Widać, że to mówi obcokrajowiec.
Aha, dużo pytanie.
Ale nie, to się też, nie pójdziecie na obiad?
To fajnie, no powiedzmy, że jest
Nie,
to dwa marki, nie?
Czy wy
Czy wy
Markowie?
Markowie?
Nie, widać, że to jest obcokrajowiec.
No widzisz?
Markowie to w ogóle jest...
Czy wy Markowie macie wątpliwość?
Marek i Mark. Ja bym powiedziała...
Czy wy Anny?
Nie, ja bym powiedziała Markowie, chcielibyście iść?
Markowie.
Markowie.
No,
Bo Marki to nie pasuje. Marki to jest
no. Śmieszne, nie? Tylko wiem, że
Chłopaki, nie, najlepiej było tak. Chłopaki chcielibyście zjeść? Chodźcie.
A czy wy Anny? To mi się bardzo podoba.
Nie, ale jest okej. No, na pewno jesteś, wiesz, perfect understanding.
No tak, w tym sensie, czy wy Anny?
Tak samo jakbyś nie powiedział, czy wy rodzice pójdziecie, to musiałbyś powiedzieć, bo tutaj
To było ciekawe.
czy wy rodzice pójdziecie, czy wy kuzyni.
Słuchaj, jeśli się tak nauczyłem, że
Super.
nie, pojechałem miałem spotkania lektora warszawskich i jedynego co mówił, to było cudowne.
Myślę, że spokojnie, to jest akurat znane w Polsce, że wszyscy wiedzą o tym, że jest Stanach. Ale Maciej zgadza się, że robić wtedy.